It's the starting five. I'm Yaron Weitzman. The Brooklyn Nets season has come to an end. We are now in year 3 of this organization selling its soul in order to sign Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. And do you know how many playoff series the group has won in those 3 seasons? Just one, which is exactly as many as the group you see pictured on the screen, the one led by Jarrett Allen, D'Angelo Russell, and Spencer Dinwiddie, one before Durant and Kyrie Irving were brought in. Here are 5 things the Nets need to do in order to turn things around. Number 1, Kyrie commits himself to competing. We'll leave the arguments and discussions over vaccines and vaccine mandates for another forum, but I think we can all agree that Kyrie's decision to not get vaccinated is at the root of everything that went wrong in Brooklyn this season. It meant that Kevin Durant had to play more games and play more minutes. It angered James Harden, which led to friction between him and Kevin Durant, which forced the Nets to trade James Harden, which meant they brought in a player in Ben Simmons, who was not ready to play and not necessarily willing to play. We'll get to that more later. And this all came just one season after Kyrie basically disappeared for 2 weeks without telling the Nets why. Kyrie has been with the Nets for 3 seasons. Do you know how many games he's played in total? That's 103. Remember, a regular season is 82 games. Kyrie has barely played 1 full season while being with the Nets for 3. When you're in a salary cap sport like the NBA and you sign superstars to max type contracts, you become over-reliant on their ability to both perform and show up. And the Nets will likely become even further committed to Kyrie this summer. He can opt out of his contract and sign an extension, something which he indicated after the Game 4 loss to the Celtics that he plans on doing. And what I can tell you is this: if Kyrie wants to come back and if Kevin Durant wants to have him back, and all indications thus far are that Kevin Durant and Kyrie remain very close, the Nets are going to be forced to sign Kyrie to whatever extension he wants. The Nets are incredibly top heavy, which means the only way they can succeed is if both their star players hold up their end of the bargain. So far, Kevin Durant has. Kyrie Irving, however, has not. Number 2, Ben Simmons returns to the court. Prior to the Nets' Game 4 loss to the Celtics this week, Steve Nash acknowledged what we basically all knew to be true in regards to Ben Simmons' injury.
I think Ben has addressed that there is a mental component with what he's going through. But how much and where he's at with that, is not for me to speak about.
Simmons is taking a ton of heat for not suiting up this postseason, more than I can honestly remember any NBA player receiving in a while. Some of it is deserved, or maybe a better way to put it is that some of it Simmons brings onto himself. The flashy outfits on the bench don't help. You can also say the same thing for him going up to reporters during Nets practices and insisting that they record him dunking during practice, only to never actually play during a game. The good news for Simmons is that I think the Nets are the perfect organization for him. They've certainly shown that they know how to deal with different types of personalities, and all indications so far are that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are insistent on having Simmons' back.
Ben's good. We have his back. He's going to be good for next year. But now we just turn the page and look forward to what we're building as a franchise and really get tougher.
Which is all great because the Nets need Ben Simmons. All of his strengths, he's big and fast and great at defense and really good at creating easy looks for his teammates, are things the Nets lack and weaknesses that the Celtics expose. If there is a team where Simmons will succeed, I truly think the Nets are it. The question going forward, though, is whether Simmons is actually interested in being a professional basketball player. Number 3, stop signing old dudes. Do you know how many minutes Kevin Durant averaged per game this season? 37.2. That's the 3rd most in the NBA, which is way too much for a 15-year vet with multiple surgeries in his history. Do you know why Kevin Durant had to play all those minutes? Yeah, Kyrie being out hurt, and so did Joe Harris missing most of the season with an ankle injury, but also the fact that the Nets used up a bunch of roster spots on guys like Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Paul Millsap meant that the team was incredibly thin at the wing position. Yes, I know the Nets are extremely capped out, but they still have a bunch of exceptions, and there are still other ways to add players to the roster who aren't aging. Kyrie even acknowledges himself after the loss to the Celtics.
This is a league that's getting younger, it's getting more athletic, it's getting taller. and this it's getting more competitive, and these young guys are hungry out here. And you see it. I can feel it.
That's how you end up with Kevin Durant being your lone wing defender, which is a huge problem and way too much to ask of a player that's needed to carry as much as he is on offense. One of the reasons the Nets find themselves in this predicament is that they've handed Kevin Durant a ton of say in personnel. We see this happen all the time with superstars. We just saw it happen with the Lakers. They do not usually make good GMs. They usually want their teams to sign former stars or guys who were once good, as opposed to young players who have yet to hit their prime. This is how, if you're the Nets, you end up with Blake Griffin, not exactly fleet of foot these days, guarding Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on the perimeter in do-or-die games. If the Nets want to advance and further in the postseason going forward, they're going to have to adapt their roster building strategy. Number 4, give Steve Nash some help. There have been some in the public who have called for Steve Nash to lose his job, though I assume Kevin Durant's endorsement of Nash after the Celtics loss puts an end to that conversation.
Steve's been dealt a crazy hand the last 2 years. Right? He's had to deal with so much stuff as a head coach, first-time coach, and trades, injuries, COVID, just a lot of stuff he had to deal with. And I'm proud of how he just focused on his passion for us.
Some of the criticism being lobbed at Nash is fair. The Nets offense could have used some more creativity and maybe try getting the ball to Durant in different ways so he wasn't attacking with every Celtics player always having their eyes on him. This also led to way too many mid-range jumpers. Part of this is because the Celtics defense is really, really, really good. But Nash and the Nets also could have benefited from some more X's and O's creativity. Part of this is by design. The reason Steve Nash is the head coach of the Nets is because Kevin Durant wanted him to be too. The reason Kevin Durant wanted Nash to be the head coach is because he knew Nash would let him play the way he wanted to. And to be clear, it's not that Nash doesn't know better or that he prefers to play with a stagnant style of basketball. It's just that he's decided to pick his battles, and that's not worth fighting over schematic issues. But we've just seen the downside of this approach. Also remember that the Nets lost Mike D'Antoni and Ime Udoka from their coaching staff this season and never replaced them. They'd be wise to try to add a veteran former head coach to Nash's staff. And maybe Durant will finally realize, after being dominated by the Celtics, that this style of basketball is not one that can win in the postseason. Number 5, restructure management. We're going to end with Kyrie Irving because, well, everything in Brooklyn revolves and ends with Kyrie Irving. And specifically, I want to highlight this quote he said after the Nets lost to the Celtics. When I say I'm here with Kev, I think that really entails us managing this franchise together alongside Joe and Sean. Joe is Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets. Sean is Sean Marks, the Nets general manager. That is Kyrie Irving, a player who has just 3 All-NBA nods, not a single on the first team, a guy who hasn't won a single thing aside from when he's played alongside LeBron James, anointing himself part of the team's management structure alongside the general manager, the owner, and one of the 10 greatest players of all time. If you don't think there's something wrong with this, I have no idea what to say to you. But if you're wondering why things have gone so haywire in Brooklyn, I think we have pinpointed the reason. If the Nets are going to turn things around going forward, they're going to have to overcome the fact that Kyrie Irving clearly thinks of himself as above the rest of the team and as somebody above reproach. That's your starting 5. I'm Yaron Weitzman. The NBA playoffs are here and heating up. For more great NBA coverage, be sure to check out the Fox Sports app.